We are here in a beautiful area of West Sonoma County, undisclosed location. Going to be doing a painting of a sunny day with a bit of the coastal influence on the scene here. So it's going to be a scene of these rolling hills with a lot of pine forest and redwoods in between. So the challenge will be to simplify this scene so that I can execute it in about an hour. And I'm looking at all the different shapes, and my goal is going to be to simplify these shapes and try to depict them accurately. So first thing I'll do is mix up a little bit of a neutral gray color to use as my quote-unquote ink for my drawing. And I'm looking at the composition, and there's a lot of horizontals in here, so I'm looking for any sort of things to make it a little bit more dynamic. And so I'm looking at this mountain peak out here. I'm going to decide that it's going to be right there, and being careful not to put it too close to the center of my composition here. So I don't always do this, but just for display or the demonstration purposes, I will divide my thing into fourths. So that'll just let me know where I'm at as I'm drawing. So if I decide that is where, actually measuring, it's actually going to be up here. So I'll go ahead and put in these horizontal lines, go across my canvas, or go across my scene. There are slight variations in the angles, and so this is actually going to be a curve I can take advantage of, play it up, make it a little more dynamic. There are some bushes that come out here, so just really loosely describing all these things. I'm purposely really simplifying them down, so they're really just to indicate where these things are, because painting isn't really happening in the drawing stage. I want to get into the painting as quickly as I can. So I should decide where my focus is going to be, and I don't necessarily need it to be the same focus throughout the entire painting, but it'll make sense to start with where I want my focal point to be. And for now, even though it's really faint out there, I'm going to decide that my little mountain peak out here is going to be my focal point. So everything I do will be in the service of making that the area the strongest area. So I'm just going to be thinking of ways to get your eye to that spot. I'm just doing this to demonstrate to you what my plan is. So, okay, that's all I really need to do for the drawing. Even though it's a very complicated scene, if you look at it on its own, it's actually easily broken up into big shapes. So that's what drew me to the scene itself. So next we got to think about how we're going to block things in. And with scenes like these where there's a lot of stacks of receding shapes. I like to start with background to foreground, but I could also, if I want, go with the large shapes down to smaller. But I feel like I like to do a background to foreground most often. Okay, so I'll mix a large amount of color. It's going to be approximating the distant colors. There's a lot of blue, and mixing a little bit of my cobalt violet hue. That's going to serve as our initial basis for the sky. And don't worry, this can and will change, so it doesn't have to be the perfect color. There's actually more purple in this base color that I put down than there actually is in the scene I'm looking at, but it's actually not terribly far off, so maybe there is more purple in the sky than I even am observing. So next I'm going to darken up that mixture, add a little bit of manganese blue hue, and this will be the color of my mountain peak. Switch to my bristle brush. Add some green, a little warm green in there. So take some of my green gold and mix it in there. That is way too bright, not enough blue. Back in there, maybe a little purple. Okay, that's pretty close. Don't go too thick. This might be a little too thick for as much as I just to make this shape. Just enough to cover the canvas, but if I go too thick, it'll be harder to correct later. And we're going in this with the idea of we're going to have to correct it. So the nice thing about this method is that you go in knowing that you're not going to get it right on the first try, so it relieves a little pressure on you. You can work faster knowing that you're going to change things as you go. Next one. It's closer. A little meadow here. Some yellow ochre and green gold in there. I'm just taking what's left of the last mixture and adding color into it to modify it. Okay, next thing, I'll put some of these dark patches of woods. So I'm mixing green, a little bit of burnt umber, and ultramarine blue. This might be a little on the dark side, so put some cadmium yellow back into this mixture. It's not as cool as I see it, but it's closer in value to what I want, so I'm going to leave it as is. Change the hue later. Grabbing a lot of viridian and decent amount of cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue. Burnt sienna. And this meadow that's closer to me, it's a base of green, gold, and white, and maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. But it's way too warm, so there's some viridian in there. Okay, so we achieved our first objective, which was just cover the canvas with colors that will serve as the base for going over this thing. So now we'll go in and add in the light and dark. Start with the dark, and I'm treating the mountain as one shape, so leave that alone other than just adding a bit of color that covers up this part. Alright, okay, so again going from background to foreground, mixing up a slightly darker color to depict these peaks back here. Again, avoiding too much detail. This is all just to record the dark pattern I see. Can't really tell where the fog is going here, if it's coming in or going away, so we'll just have to work with what nature gives us here. As these darker shapes get closer and closer, I just add some more viridian and cobalt violet hue to darken it. Staying away from my browns as colors to actually use as base colors. I more use my browns as modifiers of colors. Okay. Ultramarine blue in this mixture. Still making sure there's some greens and just a little bit of brown. Depicting some of the shadow shapes, not all of them. Just enough to give me an impression of the scene here. Okay, there's some oaks here, and their shadows have a lot more green in them. Well, they're warmer, so I'm adding some umber into those. Just kind of drawing the shape in as a big mass for the shadow. Noticing that the bottom of the shadow shape is warmer, so I'm adding more umber into it, the mixture to depict that. bush in the corner here. Pick that. Shadow shapes at the bottom. Okay. It's an interesting situation with the lighting here. It's a little hazy, so the light side isn't very prominent. I could just use my local color that I put down in the initial block in and just count that as the light side, so it actually saves us a little time. We can go into the comparison phase right away, so let's do that. Alright, so this is the first stage of comparing, and in the course modules I separated the comparison of color and drawing, but in reality the way I work is I actually adjust the drawing of the shapes as I do the fixing of the color. So I will show you what I mean. So let me start to mix up a color. So in comparison from my scene to reality, I'm looking that there's more green in the color of the sky than I have in here. Mine is skewed a little more toward purple. So I'm gonna actually add green into my large shape here of the sky. And as I do this, I'm actually looking at the contour of that distant mountain range and using the way I lay my strokes down to depict that more accurately. Not worrying too much about like the quality of the edge yet. I'll do that later. I just want to make sure that I have the right color. So because I adjusted one color, I have to adjust the adjacent colors next to it. So I'm comparing that, and what I have on my canvas does not match what I have on the scene. So what I have to do is match that. And it looks like it's cooler, or it's not cooler, it's actually warmer and has a little bit more bluishness to it. So I'm actually using the mixture of what I had down initially to my advantage and not over mixing. I'm just letting the color kind of show through in my brushwork. That feels closer to me now than what I had before. Next we go down to the shape joining that one, and okay, that's actually pretty close in color, but the shape is a little off. So I'll try and mix that color again, or get something pretty close. That's pretty close. You want to keep simple mixtures in the beginning, especially, just so that you're able to easily get back to the color you want later on if you need it. These are actually a little darker. Peak. These aren't as important to the scene, so I'll let them kind of fade away. So there's the fog is coming in, so won't worry about too much yet. I'll just move on to the next shapes that I need to adjust. It's kind of a light greenish gray by adding white and green gold to the purple mixture. This will be how I'm depicting fog for now. You kind of have to anticipate what's going to happen next, so I'm just adding this in as a foundation in case the fog takes up more of my scene. And I don't know, I kind of hope it does. It might make for a more dramatic scene. But we'll see what happens. Okay, next shape. This color here is close, but it has a little bit more green in it. Get my Viridian, mix it with green gold, a little bit of purple to dull it slightly. Let's see what we got. A little more blue to it. It's pretty close. Some more warm green. My green gold is my warm green. I go to it a lot. Might be a little too bright, saturated. So you make a mixture, do like a test stroke, see how close you are. If you need to change it, go back to your palette, add things to it till you get what you need. But you really have to be thinking, okay, what is going to get me closer? What one pigment will get me closer to what I'm seeing? Is it a blue, a purple, any other color on my palette? It's a lot of blues and greens, so I'm not really going toward my cadmiums yet, but that could change as we get further down. Next shape will be this one that I kind of covered up, so we'll have to get it back here. Green gold, cadmium yellow. That I can tell is already too light, so just to demonstrate to you there. Let's get in there, put some Viridian back in, and you want to dull it down with some violet. So just by observation, I'm noticing that my color scheme is becoming this green-purple split, even though there's a lot of blue in it, but it's hardly any of the cool or any of my warms like alizarin. I haven't touched my orange or red. I just don't see enough of it in the scene to justify using it. So yeah, just because it's on your palette doesn't mean you have to use it. A little bit of brown. Noticing. shapes. Be a little darker shapes on those distant hills, which will be those bits of forest. Bluer. As these get closer, I see more brown in them, so that's what I'm making these shapes into. So as that gets browner, actually the ones behind it get more purple. Manganese blue and violet. Create these shapes back here. And the way I'm laying my brush stroke down is how I'm depicting these shapes. They're so small at this point that they can just be depicted in little short strokes, or little, not even the entire brush, just a corner of your brush. Okay. So next shape will be this meadow, and I don't think I'm too far off actually already. So we'll have to be doing a lot of adjusting of the color, just adjusting of the shape a little bit. It's not too far off either. So that's to gradate into green a little more over here. So yeah, just adjusting as I go and comparing the color to both what's underneath and what's next to it. It's a little more over here. So mixing a little bit of cadmium yellow and green right into my shape. All right. Keep going from there. Putting in this little patch, bush, or whatever those are. smaller trees. Next thing. Viridian and yellow ochre will be my base color. Maybe I'll add a little bit of manganese blue and see what we got here. And is that close to what I have? I think overall, yeah, maybe add just a tiny bit of burnt sienna into it. That's a little too much burnt sienna. Go back to our mixture, Viridian and manganese blue. Just adjust that shape again. Trying to keep my shapes simple yet interesting. So we're varying the way I put the brush work down. Thing is, I still want to keep a separation of shapes here. Next are the next row of trees. So those are a lot warmer. Start with green gold, some viridian into it, burnt sienna. Okay, but that's too brown, so come back in with my viridian. That's too green. Burnt sienna. That's pretty close. So yeah, just using burnt sienna as a modifier. Drawing up this massive trees as I paint it in. Paying attention to the shape of the trees and just treating them all like silhouettes. Green gold, burnt sienna, and viridian. It's fine that they're blending into the shapes behind them because that's kind of what they're doing in real life anyway. It's going to be a little darker here, so some ultramarine, maybe a little alizarin crimson because it's making it cooler than I want. So if I want it to be darker and warmer, then I'll go with alizarin. If I want it to be darker and cooler, go with ultramarine. Tree comes up here. There's this oak tree that I haven't really described very well, so I'll do that. It's a little lighter than things around it, so I'll stand out a little more. Add some yellow ochre to that. Still moving from background to foreground, but just doing it in smaller increments. Little patch of grass here that separates the shape of the oak from the tree next to it. So I'm putting that in. Kind of important little shape. Re-establish some of these shapes here. Cleaning up this silhouette. Or, I don't know if it's a silhouette, but It's where the grass meets the patch of trees behind it, so important shape just to establish the separation of planes. Okay. Looking at this grass, there are parts of the grass that are drying out, so I'm going to add some warmer color into it. So I'm taking some alizarin crimson and cadmium yellow and mixing it into this color here. It's a little warmer over here. There's a little variation in color. And so, let's see. And okay, well, that's pretty much the comparison phase. And if you wanted to, you could leave it as is and consider that this is a good little color study. But let's take it further and go into the refinement stage next. Okay, so we'll move on to our final stage of the painting, which was going to be the refinement. And so it's just a little bit of getting in and focusing on the parts that matter to me. And right now it's that effect of the fog that's starting to come in and be a little more prominent. And just gonna go in and just a little bit more comparison, tweaking smaller shapes. Making sure that this mountain looks how I want it to look. And so I really want to feature that fog now. So looking at the color of it, it's warmer than some of the other things around it because it's capturing more of the light on it. And it's really just lighter at the rim. Going in there and really carefully putting it. Drawing the shape with paint, but also at the same time putting it down in a way where the edge of the brushwork is softer at the bottom because that's where it's sort of fading into fog, and the top is where the shape of the fog actually is better defined. So these shapes are actually getting softer because of the influence of the fog on them. So going in and softening them by carefully taking my brush and going over the shapes, or going over where the edges meet each other and softening them. Being really careful because it's a bristle brush, so I can accidentally take off a lot of paint if I press down too hard. So I'm really softly feathering. So I need to come back in and re-add some paint. Some of these edges down here might be slightly too crisp too, so going back in ever so carefully, softening them the same way I was doing before. Adding back in some color if I need. Just try and define this little shape of trees on the ridge, but not too much. You don't want to spend too much time in areas or else it will look like you did. It'll stand out too much and be a distraction. So just doing really simple little small brushwork, but not really trying to define anything. Okay. Add some of the trees on the ridge up here just to separate these two shapes. Too much foliage are in there, so I'll come back in with my Viridian. Okay, so there's no reason to really come in and try and paint every single tree in there. You're much better off just coming in and refining that silhouette. It'll read to the viewer's eye as the trees. And you won't have to do a whole lot of detail there, it just will work. Because I had strong shapes and silhouettes defined in the previous stage, this makes this a lot easier because all I have to do is just pull out just some small shapes out of the larger shape and grow it out of it. Everything we did in the beginning stages was to give you more time to work on these little parts here. So you have more time to work on them as long as you want, or as long as your light allows you to, really. And that's normally about 2 hours, so give yourself a good amount of time to work on details. Doing all the other stuff beforehand will allow you that. So yeah, most of the refinement happens where the edges meet each other. So. In the shadow side of some of these trees just so that they're standing out a little bit more against those trees and back. And gonna paint the trunks of these trees, and careful not to make them too light. I'm actually gonna use color mainly to pop them out. And this is actually a relatively dark mixture of alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, and white. And I'm trying not to make them like one continuous line. The way I put them down, I'm trying to kind of stagger them a little bit. Makes it a little more natural looking. And I don't go all the way up the tree either. It's very easy to overdo, so let's not do that. Just enough to define it. Do that with some of these trees over here. Really just adding the stems will, or stems, the trunks will actually be enough to read as trees. It was a little too bright. It's still too. One other thing you gotta be careful about is making the stems, keep calling them stems, making the trunks a little too evenly spaced and evenly sized. That will totally make it look fake. So be really sparing with the amount of trunks you add. You really don't need a lot, and it'll go a long way. If you need to, you can come back in and sort of paint over the trees, make it a little more natural looking. One thing that I should work on here is this oak. I don't feel like it's standing out like it, or I don't feel like it's reading like an oak yet. So let's go ahead and work on that some more. So adding the shadow shapes. Push that. Same thing, just because it's a smaller shape and maybe not as important as the rest of the focal point area, you definitely don't want it to slack on it, because it'll stand out in a bad way. Want to do all their simple method on it, just in a smaller area. So we're still, establishing, comparing, and refining. So what I'm doing right now is comparing it really quickly. See the colors around it, try and get it closer. And yeah, that's okay. Just refine by adding some of these branches. The light part of the branches on. It's an oak tree. Do a little bit of that for the area surrounding it. This might be like a younger oak or a bush or something. So. Darker parts of these shrubs at the bottom are warmer than the parts above it, so I'm painting accordingly. Yeah, just refining the edges is really all you need to do if you have the rest of it compared well. This grass, soften up the edges. Yeah, all I'm doing is softening up these edges where this grass meets. And last but not least, let's work on this little bush here. Just treating it like a little still life within the overall painting. So doing all the little things, comparing and refining. And shapes this small, you're pretty much doing the comparing and refining at the same time, really. Just do a quick scan for little things I may have missed here and there. A couple of shapes I maybe want to refine a little bit more. Tree here that sort of painted over. Put that back in. I like this tree because it gives more of a shape to the oak in front of it. I look for things like that when I'm painting outdoors. Shapes that define other shapes. Back. Yeah, I think that's good. Just a couple little bushes here and there. All right. This is a little too strong of a shape there, so come back in. I'm just pushing my color up into the shape there. Makes it look a little more grassy that way. So yeah, you can keep going and refining here and there, get as detailed as you want. Maybe there's a couple other little shapes here that you may want to get into or keep working on, but really I'd say this is a finished statement at this point. There's not much else that I need to add to it. There's no glaring errors that I noticed right here on the field. So yeah, that is how much I refine a piece out in the landscape. And yeah, you just take this step as far as you want, but about an hour to an hour and a half and you can get something like this done. With this amount of time, you'll have yourself a nice little finished study.